Thanks, sir.
Yes, Your Honor, I can. Thank you.
All right. And do we have your consent to proceed via Zoom this morning?
Absolutely. Thank you, Your Honor.
All right. Thank you. So the via Zoom, he is appearing electronically from Mule Creek State Prison. Okay, the court had requested counsel to be present this morning for a status conference. There are 3 motions pending before the court. Motion for post-conviction discovery under Penal Code Section 1054.9, a motion for post-conviction DNA testing, and a motion to seal court pleadings that have been filed in relation to those 2 motions. Because we had not yet had a hearing date set, the people's response had not yet been due, so I wanted to discuss with counsel a briefing schedule and scheduling a substantive hearing on those 3 motions. I also wanted to, there were references in the pleadings to potential meet and confer process between the parties to see if they had had any luck in narrowing the issues that the court may have to decide in terms of discovery and testing. So I wanted to check in with counsel, see where we are with that process, and then we'll move forward from there. So let me start with the moving party. Counsel for Mr. Peterson.
Yes, Your Honor. We did go to the District Attorney's Office in Stanislaus County on February 13th to have a meet and confer. Unfortunately, we were unable to resolve any issues. I do have a letter memorializing the discussions that were had. If the court would like a copy, I'd be happy to provide that. I sent it to the District Attorney's Office on February 24th, just setting forth the issues we discussed and the impasses that we had.
Okay, thank you. Counsel for the people.
Your Honor, we did have a meet and confer, and we are at the position where we intend to file our motion, our responsive motion, and what we need the court's help with perhaps is identifying the date that we begin to run that time. We have 90 days for service.
Hold on just a second, Ms. Slatiger. We're getting a little bit of background. I'm going to mute, or I'm going to ask the clerk to mute Mule Creek because we are getting some background noise. So, Mr. Peterson, if you do need to communicate with your counsel at any point, you can let us know that by simply raising your hand so that we can unmute you. Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Ms. Slatiger.
Thank you. So, we received the motion with all the attachments on January 9th. The AG's office, which also needed to be served, received the motion with the attachments, exhibits, on January 23rd. So we will be ready to file our response by 90 days from either of those dates. We're looking at either April 22nd from when the AG was served or April 18th from when we were served.
Okay. And so if that's going to be when you're going to be filing your responses or when you're going to be ready to file your responses, how much time would Mr. Peterson's counsel need to then file any?
Your Honor, we would ask for 2 weeks.
Okay.
Can I just inquire, we were given somewhat mixed signals at the meet and confer concerning whether the District Attorney's Office intends to file a blanket opposition to both motions or whether there are some specific items that they will be objecting to and others that they will not with respect to the discovery motion. So if the court could inquire whether they intend to file a blanket motion opposing all requests or if it's with respect to certain items, perhaps we could begin receiving the items that they are not objecting to.
I mean, I would expect that the council could handle that in the meet and confer process. So the people are entitled to an opportunity to respond. They can decide what the scope of their response is going to be. If you're going to need 2 weeks to respond to that, then I will set a hearing that contemplates that you will have time to file a reply, and I will have time to read all of the pleadings before we have the hearing. So let's see. If the people are looking at being ready to file their responsive pleadings by the 22nd of April, and council's going to need at least 2 weeks for the reply, then that would put us with a briefing finishing somewhere around May 6th. So we would be looking at a hearing. I'd like at least 2 weeks to review the last of the pleadings, so somewhere on or after the 20th of May.
Your Honor, if I might,
Yes.
in terms of the timing of our response, I was speaking specifically about the DNA motion.
Mhm.
That we'll be ready to respond to that on that date.
Okay.
And then we would ask for an opportunity to file a response to the discovery motion as well, and we would ask 90 days from the date we file the DNA motion to respond to the discovery motion.
Is there a reason that you need an additional 90 days beyond for the discovery motion, or why they can't go in parallel, Ms. Vladecker?
Yes,
Or
Your
Mr.
Honor.
Harris?
Yes. As the court may have already seen in the pleadings, the defense pleadings in this particular case, specifically for the DNA motion, is 142 pages of pleadings, plus over 880 pages of exhibits that are attached. The exhibits came to us later than the initial pleadings, and so that's been one of the delays for us, having to go through each of those particular exhibits. The statute for the DNA motion does have a 90-day deadline. The statute for the discovery does not have a deadline. It's been interpreted by the court to be a reasonable time frame.
Okay.
We think that the DNA motion would also assist, having that resolved would also assist in some aspects as to the discovery motion, because specifically in the statute it says that the two do not work necessarily in conjunction.
Right.
Also, the discovery motion itself is another 62 pages with a large volume of exhibits for that as well. So we've been concentrating on trying to get the DNA motion, which does have the deadline done. A lot of the materials that we will have in the DNA response will be applicable to the discovery, but we just think a reasonable time period based on the size of these motions, it's not unreasonable to ask for another period of time.
Well, I guess the concern that I have about 90 plus 90 in terms of your responsive pleadings is that the Court of Appeal has issued a stay for a relatively limited period of time. We're working on a 6-month deadline before, and I understand that there is the potential for an extension of that deadline if there's additional good cause, and not being done with the pleadings here and with the hearings here determining the scope of the discovery would potentially be good cause. But given that they have sort of given us a 6-month time window to work with for what they think would be an initial opening, I'm concerned that setting a briefing schedule for that exhausts the entirety of that time period is not going to be viewed as potentially reasonable by them. So, and these two statutes, while I understand that a lot of the issues may be interconnected with the discovery the defense is seeking, I don't see a lot of what they're seeking in the 1054.9 motion appears to me to be in the nature of file reconstruction. Some of it, not so much, but there are things where essentially they're asking for missing bait stamp numbers and other things that are referenced in reports that they already have. I don't understand why that couldn't be worked on in parallel. That's what I'm still waiting to hear. So if the people want to address that, I'd be happy to hear any argument on it.
Yes, Your Honor. One of the things as it relates to the discovery motion, there was a couple of issues. One is we believe it to be issue preclusion, where in fact there has already been a previous 1054.9 motion that has been brought, has been litigated, and resolved primarily against the defense back in 2011, 2012. So because of that, we have to go back and we have to call out what has previously been dealt with, and that's requiring us, again, to go back through things that are not necessarily in their materials, but it's in the court record. We also believe that a lot of these items have been raised and litigated as part of the initial appeal and also litigated as part of the first habeas. So because of that, and unfortunately we will be providing to the court or asking the court to take judicial notice of the petition that was there because a lot of these issues have been raised and have been adjudicated. So because of that, there's a lot of back and forth from the record, and there is going to be a large amount of reading for both sides.
Okay. That brings up another point. The defense did make a request in the initial round of pleadings for the court to take judicial notice of the entirety of the trial court file, the entirety of the direct appeal, the entirety of the habeas proceedings, and all of the Supreme Court proceedings, including all the pleadings. Is there any objection to that request from the people?
There is as to some portions. We have a portion of it in our response to the DNA motion to address that. But
okay.
Basically for the court, anything that is part of the record of the case that has been adjudicated, we have no objection to that being taken judicial notice of because it's the law of the case in a sense. What we do have a complaint about is there's a request from the petitioners that the court take judicial notice of their pleadings in these new proceedings. Those are hearsay, and just because they've been filed does not make them admissible. So because of that, we will be objecting to those portions of their request, but the fact that there is a new petition and the previous court proceedings, those we don't have any objection to for judicial notice.
Okay. The reason I inquired was because since you had referenced that there were other parts of the file that you were going to be asking the court to take judicial notice of, I thought we might be able to get at least some of that out of the way. But if it's going to be covered in your responsive pleadings, I will wait to rule on any request for judicial notice until I see what the scope of the dispute is. All right. So let me hear from the defense on the proposed briefing timing and timing of potential new hearings.
Yes, Your Honor. We provided a very, very detailed informal request for discovery on November 14th, 4 months ago. So the District Attorney's Office has known for 4 months which specific items of discovery we are requesting. We gave them references to Bates pages. We gave them references to where in the police reports the items we're requesting are referred to. We were very, very specific. We spent a lot of time trying to suss out what frankly are very alarming deficiencies in the discovery that was provided to the defense at the time of trial. Those are the items we're requesting. I agree it should not take 180 days for them to locate those items and provide them to us. The defense was entitled to those at the time of trial. Mr. Peterson has been waiting 20 years to find some of these police reports and audio recordings and video recordings that should have been provided. So I don't think that the nature of the request is not a fishing expedition. They're very precise, they're very specific, and we believe that they are probably very easily accessible. So we would ask that they begin providing the discovery that we are entitled to under 1054.9. The prior 1054.9 that Mr. Harris referenced does not include what we are asking for. It related specifically, almost exclusively, to expert materials and other evidence that is not included in our motion. So we are eager to get our investigation underway and completed. The Court of Appeal did give us a very short time period within which to conduct our investigation. The materials we are asking for are reasonable. They're within the scope of 1054.9, and we would like to begin receiving that discovery as soon as possible.
Okay. So in terms of briefing schedule, the court is prepared to accept the proposal by the district attorney as far as the DNA testing motion is going. And so the response for the responsive pleadings on the DNA motion will be due no later than close of business, filed and served by April 22nd. Given the timetable that was contemplated by the Court of Appeal and the fact that essentially the discovery request was made prior to this motion being filed and prior to the Court of Appeal issuing their stay on the proceedings to allow these issues to be litigated in the trial court, I am inclined to agree with the defense that a request for an additional 90 days beyond the briefing on the 1054 issues is too long, given the timetable that the Court of Appeal has given us. In terms of the briefing for the 1054.9, because the requests are extensive, it's a 62-page discovery letter with a number of subparts. Some of it is specifically identified by missing Bates stamp numbers, but some of it is broader than that. So the court is inclined to go about 30 days beyond the briefing deadline on the DNA motion. And so if I'm looking at roughly the end of May for the 1054.9 reply. Could you have it done on or before the 20th of May?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. So May 20th will be the briefing deadline for the 1054.9. All right, and then with the, so if you're looking for at least 2 weeks for the reply, Ms. Mitchell, that your reply will be already done on the DNA before you get the responsive pleadings on the 1054.9. How much time do you contemplate you'll need for a reply on the 1054.9?
We could file our reply by June 3rd.
Okay, so reply pleadings for the defense on the DNA will be due, if you're looking for 2 weeks, that would put it May 6th. And reply pleadings for the 1054.9, you indicated June 3rd, so that's fine. Motion to seal. That is something that I think we probably can and should do before we deal with the substantive pleadings. And so I did not see a responsive pleading on the motion to seal. How much time do the people think that they would need on a responsive pleading to the motion to seal?
The only issue that we have as to the motion to seal, and this is why we have not filed something, is the documents in question that are being requested. The people have never been provided with an unredacted copy of those reports. We still do not know who these witnesses are. They're anonymous to us. So we're asking the court to order the petitioner to turn those over to us before we can actually decide one way or the other. But the people's position is we probably won't be objecting to the motion to seal based on what's alleged once we have that information.
Okay. Ms. Mitchell?
Your Honor, the identity of the witnesses whose names are redacted in the declarations that Mr. Harris is referring to have stated that they are fearful of retaliation by the Modesto Police Department if their names become known, and have asked that their names remain sealed. I would request that we perhaps have a conference in chambers to discuss this issue. It's sensitive to our ongoing investigation. There are a number of other witnesses who we have been investigating who are in a similar situation.
Okay. Well, all I'm asking for essentially is a briefing schedule for the motion to seal. And there's a procedure that's set forth in the rules of court for a motion to seal in terms of lodging a pleading with the court that is the proposed sealing and the narrowly tailored nature of it, and serving it on the opposing party. It appears that that actually hasn't been done in this case. All of the pleadings that were filed were essentially filed publicly, but with the redactions that you are proposing. So in terms of the procedure for the motion to seal, it is, I would say, somewhat unusual given the rules of court. And I anticipate that the parties will not be the only ones who want to be heard on the issue of the motion to seal, given the nature of the case. So let's set a briefing schedule. I'm not going to make any specific orders, and whether or not the motion is compliant with the rules of court and the proposed redactions are within the nature of the rules of court is something I'm going to rule on at the time of the motion, not now when I have one motion, not a response, and not all the pleadings that I anticipate that I'm going to get on it. So how much time would the people need in order to be prepared to file a response to what is in the record?
2 weeks would be fine.
Okay, that's fine. And then any reply that you may have to that, Ms. Mitchell, how much time would you need once you get the people's response?
1 week, please, Your Honor.
Okay, so 2 weeks from today is the 26th of March, so people's response will be due March 26th, close of business. And you said 1 week, Ms. Mitchell, for your reply. That would put it about April 3rd. So April 3rd for motion to seal reply. And we will need to set, let's set a hearing date on the motion to seal, and then hearing dates on the DNA and the 1054.9. The hearing date on the motion to seal can be earlier, so that'll be, we'll do that first. Proposals from council if we're looking at April 3rd for the close of briefing, and the court will need about a week to review on the motion to seal. So anytime after April 15th is fine. What's council's preference?
We can do April 16th.
April 16th is fine for us. It's fine for the court.
All right. Let me just check the court schedule. Yeah, I'm free April 16th, so that's fine. April 16th, 9 a.m. motion to seal. And Ms. Mitchell, is Mr. Peterson going to want to be personally present for that or continue to appear electronically?
My understanding is that his preference is to appear electronically, but he can correct me if that is not accurate.
Okay, and let's go ahead and ask to unmute for that. Still muted. All right, Mr. Peterson, we're contemplating an April 16th hearing on the motion to seal the pleadings or parts of the pleadings in this matter. Are you going to want to appear via Zoom or in person for that?
Zoom is fine, thank you, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. Then, for hearing dates on the DNA motion and the 1054.9, what's the party's preference in terms of hearing those together or separately?
Your Honor, we would prefer to have the DNA issue resolved as soon as possible so that if there is going to be testing ordered, we can get that started.
Okay, people.
We don't know what's going on.
Okay, that's fine. So if the briefing on the DNA motion is going to be completed by May 6th, then, and if I need a couple of weeks to read the pleadings, then we're looking at the last week of May. So any preference by council during the week of May 27th for the hearing on the DNA motion, and what is the time estimated necessary for that argument?
We can be available May 28th, Tuesday, May 28th.
That is the day after Memorial Day, so I don't know if that's going to cause travel problems or any issues for the court's calendar.
I don't have any plans on Memorial Day, but if council do and they would prefer to go to the 29th or sometime later in the week, that's fine.
29th is fine with me.
Okay, and do we think it'll be anything more than a full day?
Don't think it should be more than a full day.
Ms. Mitchell?
Having not seen their opposition, I can't say, but I would hope not more than a day.
Okay, we'll block off a full day for it, so, and it may not take that long, but we'll be prepared if it does. May 29th at 9 a.m. for the DNA testing motion. Then the 1050, so in terms of the DNA testing motion, Ms. Mitchell, do you know if Mr. Peterson has a preference in terms of Zoom or personal appearance?
I believe his preference is Zoom.
Is that correct, Mr. Peterson?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, so that'll be via Zoom. Okay, and then we'll need to schedule the 1054.9 hearing. If the briefing is going to close on that on June 3rd, then we will need, if the court needs, that is going to run into some travel plans that I have, and I'm going to need to step off the bench briefly to confirm exactly when I'm returning because it's an extensive absence in June. So let me step off the bench briefly, consult my calendar, and let you know after essentially when I'm going to be returning and when I will be available for that, and then we'll discuss dates. So we'll take a brief recess. So, in terms of the court's availability for the 1054.9 motion, I'm going to have to go until after July 1st. So, counsel, I'm looking at sometime during, if I'm going to be reading the pleadings after I return, I'm going to be looking at sometime during the week of July 15th.
We can be available July 15th, Your Honor.
Okay. Okay. July 15th, 9 o'clock. And in terms of your client's appearance preference, Ms. Mitchell, also Zoom or in person for that one?
I believe Zoom.
Okay. Mr. Peterson, is that correct? Still muted. All right.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. Last housekeeping matter, the court did, to the court's department email, receive an ex parte communication from apparently some kind of a spectator. I read about one sentence of it, enough to realize it was an ex parte communication, did not read any further, and counsel have been provided, as I understand from the clerk, copies of that email. Did both counsel receive it?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And the court is not going to be reviewing any incoming email to that inbox in the future to avoid that issue recurring in the future. So people shouldn't bother to email. Okay, is there anything else either council needs to take up for today's date before we recess?
I have one question, Your Honor.
Yes,
We
Ms.
have
Mitchell.
received a number of inquiries from members of the press and the media asking for copies of the motions we filed. We have not provided anything to anyone in the media or the press. Apparently, they are not on the court's website, and so I'm just asking for guidance. Is there any issue with us providing the motions, or is the court planning to put them on the website so they are available?
I don't have any plans in that regard while the motion to seal is pending, at least, and I have not made any orders about what counsel may or may not do in terms of their communication with the media.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay.
Your Honor, if
Yes.
people can make a suggestion, one of the things that Judge DeLuca did during the trial because of the media attention and not wanting to be distracted by additional requests that would come in from the media once a motion was filed, his position was that he would take the motions filed by either side and he would hold them from being put on the website or from public filing until the other side responded, because a lot of times that resolves some of the issues or questions that may have arisen. So we would suggest that might be a possibility here as well.
The difficulty, and I think part of this, Mr. Harris, is that the court's filing procedures have changed since Judge DeLuca was the file. We don't have a lot of control over when things come in now because it's all electronic filing. So I don't actually see it until the clerk's office processes it. So while I appreciate the suggestion, it's not consistent with our mandatory filing procedure. So thank you all. Okay.
911, where's your emergency? You need to send paramedics, I think.
Okay. And tell me everything. Tell me all about what your sister looked like when he smacked her.
She was on the bed, laid down, and he always scares her when it's nighttime and with that camera.
With the camera?
He has a little camera.
Mm-hmm. Tell me all about the way he scares her with the camera.
He goes high, and he scares her.
Tell me what the camera looks like.
It's like long and then square and then square.
Okay. And help me understand where the camera is located at.
Everywhere.
Everywhere?
Like in the room, if it's in the living room, he could still see it. Because sometimes she likes to get snacks when they're not there.
Okay. Tell me more about that.
I don't know what you mean by that.
Okay. acts when they're not there? Tell me more about it.
Like, she goes in the kitchen
Okay.
when the camera's right here, and she doesn't know, and she gets milk. But her lip is all messed up, like it's this fat.
Okay. Tell me everything that happened to her lip.
It got popped.
Okay. Was there ever a time where you slapped her anywhere else on her body? Okay. Okay. And tell me everyone that cooks at home.
Only my mom.
Tell me everything that your mom cooks.
Last time she cooked eggs and bananas. For my sister and me.
Okay. Tell me everyone that eats the food.
If Jose doesn't make her any food, then my mom will start getting that.
Okay. Was there ever a time where someone wasn't allowed to eat the food?
My sister.
Tell me all about that.
She only ate sandwiches.
Okay. Tell me more about that.
When punishment, that's what we get.
Okay. You say when punishment, that's what y'all get? Help me understand what you mean by that.
Like, we only get sandwiches.
Tell me all about what kind of sandwiches.
I don't know what you mean by that.
Okay. Okay. Well, Jordan, I asked you a lot of questions today, okay? Do you have any questions for me from the things that we talked about today?
No.
Okay. We all have safe people in our lives. And safe people are people that we can talk to and people that we trust, okay? Who are your safe people?
My mom.
Okay.
And my dad.
Okay.
No, not my dad, because last time he took me away from my mom.
Okay.
So I already have a dad.
What's your dad's name?
Alfred.
Alfred? Tell me more about him taking you away from your mom.
He called CPS on my mom, and then they took me away from my mom, and then he kept me.
Okay. Okay. I want to let you know that you can always talk to, like, the teacher at school, and they're safe people to talk to, or someone from CPS, okay? You can also talk to someone like me, or a police officer. We're all safe people that you can talk to also, okay? Is there anything that you're going to do later today after we're done talking here?
Color.
What color? Okay, do you want to go back to the lobby and finish your coloring?
Yeah.
Okay, now, I need your help with putting these markers back here, okay? All right. Thank you, Jordan.
Yeah.
Did you want to take this around with you?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, now I'm going to put this away. Okay, and we're going to tear this off gently, okay? I'll show you how. You hold it down. There we go. Now, I'm going to fold this part so it's easier to carry. There you go. You can follow me this way, okay? It was nice meeting you.
I know it's a little small on this video, but when Jordan was asked to show what his hand looked like when he hit Mercedes, were you able to see it?
Yeah, she had an open palm.
Pass the witness. Defense. Thank you.
How long, Ms. Roma, how long after this incident did you leave CPS? I mean, months or weeks or?
That was February.
It was in February 2022?
I went on leave in May of 22.
The same year?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and up until that time, what actions did you take in regard to what you had just seen?
I continue to investigate the case and let
I'm
SAPD.
sorry, did you say you cleared the case?
I continue to investigate the case and I let SAPD take over the criminal side of the case.
Okay, now, apparently we've heard a couple of comments about CPS being called. Did you ever find out how many times CPS was called on Katrina?
I know it was a handful, but I don't know the exact amount from looking into the case.
And since you had the time to look, how many cases were called on Jose Angel?
That I don't remember, ma'am.
You don't remember?
No, ma'am.
Did you ever bother to look?
Like I said previously, we do look into the cases before we go out on both parties involved.
You're saying we. Who is we?
All of investigators. Before you go out to a case, you look at both parties involved.
So many people at CPS looked into this matter.
Not into this matter.
I'm sorry?
Not into this matter. I'm saying in general, on any case we get called out on, the investigator will look into the parties involved.
Specifically with this case, because that's why we're here. How many people looked into this case, if you know?
I don't know. I know I did.
You didn't?
I did.
You did, but
Yes,
you
ma'am.
didn't check on Jose.
Yes, I ran both backgrounds prior to going out to the case, but I don't remember in relevance to him.
Isn't it true that you don't remember because there weren't any?
I can't recall, ma'am.
What did you look at before coming here today?
I didn't really look at anything prior to coming here.
Who did you speak with?
I spoke with the district attorneys.
District Attorney, yes. Was it the district attorneys that you see in the courtroom today?
Yes, ma'am.
When you took Jordan from that child safe place, where did you take her?
I don't recall, but if I would have to say back to the foster home where she was at.
Was this a family member in this foster home or someone else?
It was somebody else that night. The first night we removed her, she got placed in a group foster home and then placed her in a foster home, I believe, within the next week, and then cleared the family with the following week.
I'm sorry, what did you say about the family?
Cleared a family member the following week.
Thank you. Do you remember which family member?
I don't remember. I want to say it's Guadalupe.
Excuse me?
Guadalupe.
Was she
She's
the-
a
was
great,
she the
great,
grandmother
great
of-
aunt.
Excuse me. You cannot speak over each other. If you speak over each other, the court reporter cannot take it down. All right, ask your question.
Guadalupe, do you remember her last name?
I do not.
Do you recall if it was the grandmother?
No, she's a great, great, I want to say another great aunt.
A great aunt. It
Yes.
wasn't in the same house as the Homer people, was it?
No, ma'am.
And do you know if she's still there?
I do not know.
Because you're not there anymore, but the last time you were at CPS, was she at that home with that particular aunt, Guadalupe?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Is there anything else you want to add to this that you found out from your interviews that you didn't cover?
No, ma'am.
Thank you very much. Yes, the witness.
No further questions, Your
All
Honor.
right, is this witness excused or subject for recall?
Excused from the state.
Excuse Your Honor, completely.
All right, the rule has been invoked. That means you cannot discuss your testimony with anyone or view anything. The only persons you're allowed to speak to are attorneys for the state or defense. Thank you.
Thank you.
State, call your next witness.
The state calls Anthony Adame.
you take a seat here, please? All right, can you raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give will be the truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do, Your Honor.
All right, you can lower your hand, state your name for the record, please.
My name is Anthony Adami.
All right, if you'll make sure you keep your voice up so that the members of the jury can hear and the court reporter can hear.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, state.
Good afternoon, Mr. Adame. How are you presently employed?
I'm presently employed with the Department of Family and Protective Services, Child Protective Services.
Okay, and what is your title there?
I am a special investigator for the department.
So we just heard from Ms. Julie Rummel, who is no longer with the department. How does your role differ from the role that she had?
Understood. So my role is slightly different than what we would call investigators. Special investigators are a specialized unit within the department. Our role consists of assisting investigations with high media cases, child death investigations, any investigation involving serious injuries such as skull fractures, broken bones, severe burns, anything complex with that happens within the department. They assign us to these cases to include cases such as labor trafficking, sex trafficking. We conduct investigations on our own employees. We conduct investigations with law enforcement, and we act as liaisons for law enforcement and all local law enforcement as well.
What kind of background do you have? And do you have any background in law enforcement?
Yes, ma'am. I have approximately 6 years in law enforcement. I was a police officer at Belton Police Department, located just north of Austin, Texas. During my time frame with Belton Police Department, I was a patrol officer. Then I became a detective. While my tenure of being a detective, I investigated crimes such as high up as capital murder. I conducted several crimes against children, those types of investigations. And then I also conducted investigations involving child pornography. I also conducted investigations involving felony type cases such as theft, any kind of aggravated assault, any kind of sexual assault type cases. And then I kind of ended there shortly with investigations into drug enforcement as well. Also narcotics agent.
Okay. So up until February, well, let me go back. How long have you been with DFPS as a special investigator?
I've been with the department for approximately 4 years and just over 2 months.
Okay. And where were you before that?
At the Belton Police Department.
Okay, so you went straight from law enforcement to be a special investigator with CPS?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And you stated earlier that as a special investigator, you work with law enforcement?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And are you familiar with the case involving 5-year-old Mercedes Lusoya?
Yes, ma'am.
How did you first become aware of the case?
I was on call during this investigation, this particular investigation. I was called out by my supervisor to respond to this child death investigation.
And do you recall the date?
I believe it was on February 7th, 2022.
Okay. And where were you called out to?
I was called out to the Texas Vesta Medical Center. It's kind of south of town, south of downtown,
Okay.
off of Military Drive.
Do you recall who was there when you arrived?
When I arrived on scene, I observed Officer Cahill. I observed Detective Saez, the coworker that I was working with at that time, Investigator Julie Rummel. And then I also went directly to where the child Mercedes Lasoya was at. And I briefly recall seeing Jordan Lasoya, her sister, and then several medical personnel as well.
What was kind of the first step you did in your investigation?
My focus was geared towards the child death. When I first made contact, it was to make contact with the homicide detective, primarily involved in the case. I made contact with Detective Saez. After making contact with him, we entered the room where Mercedes Lasoya was lying on a bed.
Now, as a special investigator, you said that you do respond to children who have been severely abused,
Yes, ma'am.
including children who are deceased.
Yes, ma'am.
What is the first step that you do when you go to the scene and you see a deceased child?
The first step that I would do is make contact with law enforcement. If they are not already there, we are contacting them there, but most of the time they are already there before we show up. First is having that communication with law enforcement, because at times that we want to maintain that integrity of their investigation. So after making contact with Detective Saez this particular night, I looked over to him. We're standing right there next to Mercedes Lasoya, and I asked, can I go ahead and work towards seeing the entire body of this child? And I was conducting a body check for injuries and anything that indicated abuse or neglect.
Okay. And why is it important to check for those things?
Because any time in a child death, we want to look for all those injuries so that we can kind of list them and see the intensity of each injury and what kind of led to that. And it kind of helps towards the investigative part. What happened? How did these injuries occur? For later on, whenever I'm going to interview the parents or individuals involved in that investigation.
So, did you conduct a body check on Mercedes Lasoya?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you describe the injuries that you saw?
Yes, ma'am. Starting from the bottom of her feet. At the bottom of her feet, she had red small dots. I would call them like pinpoints at the bottom of her feet. There were several of them. I counted more than 10 of them. On the bottom of her left toe, there was some kind of abrasion of some sort. On her left toe, particularly between her big toe and the toe right next to that, the toes in the middle, so her third and fourth one had no toenail there, and it appeared to be like there was some severe injury to that area, some abrasion of some sort. I don't know if that toe was ripped off or anything of that nature. Going up on her right foot and left ankle, there was bruising. Going up her leg on the left side on her left leg and her thigh, she had a pattern of markings. They looked kind of straight, and going down her left thigh, and they looked some kind of bruising pattern. She had severe bruises on both sides of her hips. I would say about the size of my hand. She had severe bruising on her buttock area. She had severe bruising kind of near her lower back area. towards the center of her chest, there appeared to be some bruising there as well. Her left nipple appeared to have been really red and discolored. It was very different from her right nipple. Her neck had some cuts and bruising as well. Her mouth, when I looked into her mouth, her teeth were discolored, and I observed it looked like maybe a tooth was missing. She had something underneath her chin, kind of like the skin of her underneath her, like kind of underneath her lip, looked like something was there. I don't know how to describe it other than like it was just markings all over the bottom of her lip. She had some cuts throughout her face, on her nose, kind of towards her forehead, on her cheeks. Her hair on both sides of her hair, on the top of her hair, she had some length of hair, and it was in a ponytail. However, on the side of her hair was thinned out as if it had fallen, or it was missing. It wasn't like a haircut type, like as you see on myself. It was more like bits and pieces kind of throughout her hair. And I believe that's pretty much all the injuries that I've seen, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Oh, and I forgot to mention on her arms. She had bruising on her arms, and particularly where her her hands were at in this area right here, there was some pretty severe bruising as well.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
Yes.
I'm going to show you what's been labeled at this point for identification purposes. States Exhibits 10 through 38. Can you look at those and let me know if those are fair and accurate depictions of what you saw that night?
Yes, ma'am. These are the photographs.
Do you know who took these photos?
Yes, ma'am. I had instructed investigator Julie Rummel to take photographs. Some of these pictures, I can see my own hands in them. I was present, and I instructed her to take photographs while I was helping maneuver the body with medical personnel.
Your Honor, I'd offer States Exhibits 10 through 38.
No objection, Your Honor.
All right, States Exhibits number 10 through 38 are admitted without objection.
And why is it important for CPS to take photos?
During our investigations, we have to collect evidence for our own investigations, and it proves that element of abuse and physical abuse, neglect, those sort of things, so we can prove those later on in court if need be.
So after these photos were taken, what was your next step?
Next step was to assist Julie Rummel, investigator Julie Rummel, in securing safety for the surviving sibling, which was Jordan Jordan Lasoya. We kind of parted ways in the investigation. Detective Sayas had informed me that he would be conducting an interview on Katrina Mendoza and Jose Ruiz at the police department downtown at headquarters. And I asked him if may I be present during that investigation, and he granted me permission to do so. So I followed law enforcement to headquarters at San Antonio Police Department, and Julie Rummel continued on with securing safety for Jordan Lasoya.
Did you ever meet Jordan that day?
I briefly saw her there at the hospital, but if I made I did not make any direct interaction with Jordan Lasoya at the hospital.
So, were you present when Jose Ruiz gave a statement to Detective Sayas?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you at any time, were you in the room or were you in a different room?
No, ma'am. I was in a different room, in a viewing room, while he was being interviewed by law enforcement.
Did you at any time speak to Katrina Mendoza?
I would speak to Katrina Mendoza later on that evening after she was done conducting her interview with law enforcement.
When you met with Katrina, without going into what she said, was she forthcoming with information?
Yes, ma'am.
How long did you speak with her?
I spoke to her approximately 2.5 hours to 3 hours.
Now, the next day, did you continue an investigation the following day?
I would continue the investigation, yes, ma'am.
So, what did you do next?
The next step, I believe, was to assist with conducting a forensic interview for Jordan Lasoya.
And what is the forensic interview?
The forensic interview is a process for any time that there is a major event that occurs. It is a place that we take children so they can conduct an interview with experts, for forensic interviewers, and it's in a setting that's safe for the children, and that's where we conduct those investigations. So it was in the process of making that happen.
See, the interviewers, are they, do they have any kind of certification or?
Yes, ma'am. They're accredited.
Are you familiar with the interviewer in Jordan's case?
Yes, ma'am.
What was his name?
His first name is Sam. His last name, I may mess this up, Abrigo. But I know Sam. We've met each other and had several interviews together.
And why is it important to put a child with a forensic interviewer as opposed to just interviewing them yourself?
It's the point of it is so that we don't re-victimize that children over and over. They don't have to tell their story or the event to me, law enforcement, to the next person, to the next person, to the next person. They go to one place, they tell their story, it's recorded, it's audio recorded and video recorded, so it's one time they tell their story instead of telling it several times. But overall, to prevent re-victimization, ma'am.
Okay. So other than, you said you went to headquarters.
Yes.
And you went to the forensic interview. Did you go to any other locations as part of this investigation?
Yes, ma'am. I learned that that they had resided, that Katrina Mendoza and her children, Mercedes Lasoya and Jordan Lasoya, had resided for a small period of time at the Henry B. Apartments off of Vance Jackson. So one of the steps that I was taking was going back to that apartment to make contact with apartment management.
And how recently have they resided at Henry B?
Very recent. I mean, I would say days, or within that week, they resided at Henry B. apartment, the week of Mercedes Lasoya's death.
So if there had been some evidence before that it had been a month since Jose had seen the
Yes, ma'am.
Did you find out was Jose still living at that apartment?
When I went to apartment management, I was advised that he was in the process of moving out, and I learned that he had moved to a different apartment. But I don't believe they had completely cleared out of that apartment just yet.
Do you know whose apartment it was?
I believe, according to the apartment manager, the apartment was listed under Mr. Jose Ruiz.
And when you were there, did you see evidence that children lived there?
When I went upstairs, I looked inside, and it looked like it had been cleaned, or there was a lot of stuff that was taken out. There was a couple of trash bags outside, and when I go back, I don't recall anything that I seen, such as toys or small clothing to indicate that children had been there.
And that's fine. When you had gone there, and to be clear, did you go there on your own, or did you go with anyone else?
I went there initially on my own, following up on the information that was provided to me by Katrina Mendoza during her interview. When I made contact with apartment management there, they were like, yes, Mr. Jose Ruiz resided here, and then that's when they provided me additional information. At that time, when I found out that they did reside there at some point in time, I did contact Homicide Detective Saez in reference to that newfound information.
Okay. Did you do any other investigation around the fact that they lived in those apartments?
Yes, ma'am. I conducted what we call name surveys, and basically what that is, name and address surveys. It's getting more information about what is happening in a particular location. I conducted this survey with San Antonio Police Department, and basically it is a list of events or calls for service to that particular location. And I also I also got in contact with a neighbor as well.
Okay. Did you see any concerning calls that had been made out to that apartment?
Yes, ma'am. There was several disturbance calls and loud music calls, particularly the ones that were listed as disturbance. I believe one of them indicated that they heard some screaming.
Which neighbor did you speak to?
The couple's name is Gabriel and Gabriella. I might mess up this last name. Uturbi. I had them come to one of our offices located on Nacogdoches Street up in the north side of town, and I conducted an interview with them.
Okay. Without saying what they said, were they familiar with Katrina Mendoza and Mercedes Osorio?
Yes, ma'am.
And Jose Ruiz?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, we talked about how you went up to the apartment and then you told size. Did you ever actually gain entry into the apartment?
No, ma'am. I looked, the window shades were all the way up. I kind of looked inside, and then I called him, and he advised that he's coming from downtown and he'll make his way to the apartment. And he told me to kind of hang tight there, don't move, don't leave. And then he showed up at the apartment.
Did you go inside the apartment with him?
No, ma'am. He indicated that he would be obtaining a search warrant.
Your I'm gonna show you what's been labeled states 8 and 9. These were left out of the group that I showed you earlier. Is that from the night that you saw Mercedes Lasoya at the hospital?
Yes, ma'am.
And is this a fair and accurate depiction of what she looked like at that day?
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, may I publish these as well? Or, I'm sorry, I'm gonna offer states exhibit 8 and 9.
Was it 8? I'm sorry.
8 and 9.
Thank you.
I had skipped them earlier.
No objection, Your Honor.
8 and 9 are admitted without objection.
Okay. And may I publish?
Yes. Next question, please.
Yes, sorry, we're trying to. When you were, okay, so we have viewed the forensic interview with Jordan. In that interview, she referred to thumbtacks. Was that something, that was then deemed important in an investigation?
Yes, ma'am.
And when you went to the Henry B. Gonzalez apartments, did you observe, you didn't go inside, but did you observe any thumbtacks?
Yes, ma'am. When I went towards the front door, outside of the front door, kind of on the wall to the left of the front door, there was a single thumbtack kind of eye level. I'm possibly about 5'6" or so. So I'd say just a little bit taller than me. So that's where I observed it.
Did you see anywhere else outside?
No, ma'am.
Okay, Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna show you what's, I am labeling as State's Exhibit 39. It's just the one photo. What is this a photo of?
Thumbtack. Two
Okay.
thumbtacks.
Were these the two thumbtacks that you observed?
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, I would offer State's Exhibit 39.
Any objection? No. States Exhibit 39 is admitted without objection.
Your Honor, may I publish?
Yes.
So at this point, you have spoken to Katrina at length. You have observed Jose's statement. You have observed Jordan's, and you have gone out to the Henry B. Gonzalez apartments. What else did you do in your investigation?
Yes, ma'am. We went back to the original location where Mercedes Lasoya, Jordan Lasoya, and Katrina Mendoza were residing at a new apartment with a friend, Jeanette Menendolia. Another last name that's difficult to pronounce.
And did you speak to Jeanette?
Yes, ma'am.
And was there anything troubling about Jeanette?
Yes, ma'am.
What was troubling about her?
The troubling nature was that she had observed some of these injuries to Mercedes Lasoya, and that she did not report that to law enforcement or Child Protective Services or any other adult for that matter.
And so what did you do with that?
I instructed investigator Julie Rummel that we should open up another investigation primarily on Jeanette, after we spoke with her supervisor, we called in a new intake and conducted an investigation on Jeanette as well for alleged abuse and neglect.
Okay. And did that investigation end in her, in any kind of removal?
I cannot recall at this time, ma'am.
Okay. That's fair. Okay. So, at the end of this investigation, what do you do with your findings?
I take my findings and I present that information to the investigator. The investigator at this will take that information and will make a disposition with, they'll also discuss that with their supervision and make an overall disposition, whether that's reason to believe that neglect or abuse have occurred, and there's other dispositions as well.
As part of your investigation, did you consult with other caseworkers that were knowledgeable of Mercedes Sosoya?
Yes, ma'am.
And who were they?
I consulted with Julie Rummel's supervisor at that time, Jeanette Salazar.
Okay.
I consulted with my supervisor, Robert Ruiz.
What about Heather Bryant?
I did consult with Heather Bryant. Well, she was, yes, briefly. She was in one of our staffings.
Are you aware which one of them was the last to see Mercedes?
Yes, Heather Bryant was the last one to see Mercedes
And at that
for the
time-
department.
At that time, did Heather file any concerns about Mercedes?
I don't recall at that time.
And by last time, I mean alive.
Yes, ma'am, alive.
Do you know how recently that was to when she passed?
I believe Heather had seen her in early or mid-January, so I would say it was within a couple of weeks or so from her passing.
Thank you. I'll pass the witness.
Defense, Your Honor, excuse me. I'm Teresa Conley, Mr. Ottoman. Your Honor, it's 3:40. You had said that you wanted to close at 4
Now,
o'clock.
we're continuing.
We're
Ask
gonna
your
get at least
question.
an hour.
Ask your questions.
Mr. Ottoman, Teresa Conley.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm gonna go backwards here. With all these, you're saying that Miss Heather Bryant saw her a couple weeks before she died?
I would say it's in that January timeframe.
2022? She didn't observe bruises or anything?
I can't recall what she wrote on her observations, ma'am.
Can't recall.
I can't recall what she wrote on her observations.
Well, we have old bruises on February 7th and hair pulled out. So what does CPS do about it then?
If she would have made those observations, she would have made some kind of safety plan or safety intervention, ma'am.
What did CPS do about the bruises that were there prior to February 7th? What did you do to save this child?
Ma'am,
Object, speculation, lack of personal knowledge.
Yeah.
argumentative.
All right, counsel, lay the foundation for his ability to answer that question.
So, January of 2021, somebody from your department, this Heather Bryant, interviewed Mercedes. To your knowledge, did she do anything to protect Mercedes?
I know that she was actively trying to locate Katrina Mendoza, who left that residence.
Where did she interview them?
She interviewed him at Homer Beltran's residence off of Caspin Point, I believe it is. in that December, January timeframe. But I was not present, ma'am, at those interviews.
But you were the investigator in charge of all this, right?
No, ma'am. I was the investigator assigned to the death investigation when the death occurred on February 7th. So anything before that, I was not actively involved in that investigation, ma'am.
But did you look into what was done before Mercedes' death?
I briefly looked into it, yes, ma'am.
And what is your recollection, if you have one, of when the last time CPS had an interest or interview or contact?
Again, ma'am, that
with
January timeframe.
And to your knowledge, what was done to protect Mercedes from that point?
I do not recall at this time, ma'am.
Don't you think it's important?
Yes, ma'am.
Excuse me, but why don't you recall? We're talking about the death of a child.
Object to argument it is.
Sustained.
Okay, from the beginning of your cross-examination, you did general police work when you were with Belton PD, is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
You said in the course of your description of your activities there, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I could make a mistake here, but you said you deal with high media cases.
Yes, ma'am.
So media involvement directs your attention, is that correct?
That's one aspect, yes, ma'am.
I realize it was only one. What do you do particularly with media cases?
The same as all investigations, ma'am. We
Yeah,
conduct
Mrs.
thorough
Scott.
investigations.
Excuse me. There can only be one person speaking at a time. You may answer the question.
Sorry, ma'am. Same as all investigations, ma'am.
But this specifically was Belton when you referred to the media.
No, ma'am. I was referring to my duties at the Department of Family and Protective Services.
We're calling this interchangeably CPS and Department of Family and, what is it, Family and?
Protective Services,
and
ma'am.
Protective Services, but it's basically the same place.
Yes, ma'am.
Commonly called CPS.
And commonly called the department as well, ma'am.
And you've been with them for 4 years, yes?
Yes, ma'am.
And you first learned of Mercedes when?
On February 7th.
Not before that?
Not before that, no, ma'am.
Even though in January, Ms. Bryant apparently interviewed the family, including Mercedes, at Homer's house. Is that correct?
Asked and answered.
That'll be overruled. You can answer the question.
That is the history, yes, ma'am.
Most recent history.
It's the history, ma'am.
And once again, I'm old, I don't remember everything. Do you recall any follow-up of CPS after that investigation in January of 2022, right before she died?
I recall that investigator Heather Bryant at the time was trying to locate Katrina Mendoza, and there was some disconnect in communication for a period of time. Towards the end of her, or towards her investigation and the beginning of our death investigation.
Do you have any recollection of what Heather did as a result of the January 22 interview?
No, ma'am.
Okay, you say there was a disconnect.
Object, lack of personal knowledge wasn't there.
I wasn't.
Excuse me. You can answer the question if you can answer it, but if you're not present, then the objection will be sustained.
I was not present, ma'am.
You weren't present, but is that just isolated? Does CPS have isolated interviews here and then investigators later don't know what happens? Is there any connection within your department as to what is done to protect a child?
Yes, ma'am. We do go back and look at some of that history, but in the beginning of a death investigation, there's a lot of things occurring right at the beginning of that death investigation. So we do go back to that historical information, but initial on that day one, I'm kind of working all those steps that I was talking about earlier, ma'am.
What could have been done to stop this death investigation by CPS?
Object to speculation.
Speculation for, ma'am?
Yes, you want to respond to her objection?
In regard to speculation, how could it be speculation if he was the investigator in charge of this incident?
All right, your objection is overruled.
I'm sorry, Your Honor?
The objection is overruled.
You can answer that, sir.
Can you ask a question again, ma'am? I'm sorry.
Ma'am, would you read it back, court reporter, please?
What could have been done to stop this death investigation of dash objection speculation? That's what I have on the objective.
What could have been done?
Object to speculation.
Is there any other objection besides speculation?
Argumentative.
That will be overruled.
Overrule. Answer.
As not being the primary investigator in that previous investigation, I cannot respond for that investigation. I was only working on the investigation that I was assigned to, ma'am.
You have basic procedures, sir, yes?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so when somebody has an investigation and things were not perfect because there was a follow-up, exactly what is done to save the children who are being supposedly protected by your agency?
Object counsel testifying. Argumentative, lack of knowledge of what happened before her death.
All right, that'll be overruled unless there's another objection.
So to answer your question, ma'am, when I came into this death investigation, we did just that. We removed Jordan Lasoya, the surviving child. So we conducted a removal to keep her safe from additional abuse and neglect, ma'am.
As a rule, when somebody is investigating, they can't find somebody that interview needs a follow-up. What, as a rule, does your company do to protect the children out there?
We continue to try to strive towards engaging that communication. Maybe there's a miscommunication with that family, but we continue to try to engage that family. But each case is different, ma'am.
This case, again, I'm asking you, what could your company, your CPS, have done to protect Mercedes from being killed by whatever?
Object to vague, object to asked and answered. He wasn't involved in the previous investigation.
All right, that objection will be overruled.
Again, ma'am, I wasn't involved in the investigation previous to me, so I can't account for what happened before me. I can only account for what we did during the course of our investigation, and we did conduct a removal of Jordan Lasoya.
Jordan's not dead. Prior to this investigation, I asked you, generally, what does CPS do to protect the children that are in danger?
Generally speaking, there's probably different plans, such as a safety plan. Maybe we have a family member that will come in and kind of assist with that supervision of the children. Sometimes we do what's called family team meetings, where we bring several family members and collaterals or professionals in and try to talk about the issue, all the way up to removing a child from a home. And probably placing with family members or.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, ma'am.
Was Mercedes removed from the home?
No, ma'am.
Why not?
Again, I cannot answer the questions for an investigation that was previous to me, ma'am. I started the investigation on February 7th when I was notified about the death of Mercedes Lasoya, and I've never done a investigation with Mercedes LaSoya alive in all my years of being with the department.
I realize that, sir, but you're the investigator at the point of, at least at the point of her death.
Object
Did
to
you look,
argumentative.
Let me hear the question.
at least at the point of her death, did you do any investigation to find out what had been done to try to prevent the death?
Object to relevance.
Sustained.
To your knowledge, what, if anything, did CPS do to try to prevent Mercedes' death?
Object asked and answered. Object relevance.
Sustained.
Who is in charge to follow through on cases that are being investigated?
Object to relevance.
Sustained.
Your Honor, I'd like a ruling on that
I
sustained.
said sustained.
Could I have what, know why?
It's not relevant.
It's
The
not
objection
relevant?
to the state's objection was objection relevance. I sustained it. Now, if you want to address as how it's relevant, the court will hear that.
I'm asking, Your Honor, how is it relevant?
The objection has been made, the court has sustained it. You may ask your next question, counsel.
I'm sorry, Your Honor, I don't understand why you ruled that it was irrelevant when we're talking about the death of a child and the follow-up of CPS.
All right, the court has made its ruling. The objection from the state was relevance. If you want to respond to their relevance objection, I will hear it. Otherwise, their objection to relevance is sustained, and you can ask your next question.
When you checked Mercedes' body in the hospital, you said you looked under the clothes, I believe, or the blanket or whatever was on her?
The only thing that she had on was a pair of orange underwear. Orange in color.
But you did check the body,
Yes, ma'am.
and you said there were bruises of varying degrees of age, severity, etc.
I did not mention anything about bruising and age. I indicated that there was bruises, but I didn't indicate the age of any bruises.
You didn't say that some were earlier or some were more recent, that there were various...
I don't recall that, ma'am.
You didn't say that?
I don't recall saying anything about age because I can't, as an investigator, I would elect to utilize medical professionals to indicate those kind of injuries.
But you looked at Mercedes' body,
Yes, ma'am.
and you did see bruises. We've all seen them now with the pictures. Some
Yes,
of them
ma'am.
were recent.
Again, I'm going to elect to have a medical personnel answer that type of question, ma'am, as I am not medical personnel.
Did you notice the color of the bruises? Were some yellow, were some blue, were some faded?
I observed that some of them appeared to look like a darker than her hue. I would say kind of like a dark grayish, black, bluish type color.
Black and blue.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And with your observation, was there anything that appeared to be very recent?
Object to asking if you lack of personal knowledge.
All right, that will be overruled. You can answer if you can answer.
Object to cause for opinion.
It was overruled.
That'll be overruled. If you can answer.
No, ma'am, I can't answer that question because I didn't know exactly what was real recent.
You couldn't say there was recent. Didn't you say that you saw blood on her face or mouth? Their teeth were out?
I observed like abrasions where you can kind of see like the red blood on top of those abrasions. Yes.
Okay, and you testified that some teeth were missing. Is that right?
I observed like a tooth kind of near the front that looked like it was missing a piece of it or something in the front. It's
The
kind
child
of,
was 5 years old, yes?
yes, ma'am.
Are you familiar that children lose their first teeth, their baby teeth at around that age?
Yes, ma'am.
Could that have been the reason why her teeth were missing?
That's just speculation.
All right, if you can answer.
You mentioned too that the teeth were decayed or
There was some discoloration, ma'am.
discoloration.
Yes, ma'am.
What kind of discoloration?
It just looked more yellow, more, there was like a yellowish tint than some of the others.
Was it about hygiene that you were saying, or was it actual wounds?
I would say most likely hygiene or something of that nature, ma'am.
And you were present at this child safe interview throughout the whole time, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And as a result of that, what action did you take?
As a result of the forensic interview, I went to the apartments to try to backtrack where it happened at.
And you had never been there prior to
No,
the
ma'am.
Henry B. Apartments?
No, ma'am.
Is there any record that your company, or excuse me, CPS, had been to the Henry B. apartment prior to the incident of her death?
Object to relevance.
All right, that will be sustained.
Was there any indication in the records that Heather Bryant had been to the Henry B. apartments prior to the death of Mercedes?
I don't believe so, ma'am.
When you had your interviews with neighbors and people at Henry B., they indicated that they had made reports about loud noise and disturbances. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
As a result of the disturbances, was CPS contacted?
No, ma'am.
Why was it relevant for you to testify that reports had been made?
Object to.
Sustained.
What specific steps did CPS take to follow up on Katrina, who was under investigation?
Object to relevance.
Sustained.
Your Honor, it wasn't relevant that there was a follow-up on somebody who was a known abuser?
Sustained.
Have you, if you recall, any investigation on Jose prior to the death on February 7th?
I have had no personal investigation with Jose Ruiz prior to the death of Mercedes Lozoya.
Was there any investigation that you know of into Jose on Hal Ruiz regarding this family?
Not that I recall, ma'am.
Thank you. Isn't it true that your actual last interview with Heather Bryant was in January of 2021, not January of 2022?
Object, misstates.
That'll be overruled. You can answer the question.
January of 2021?
Yes, January of your records indicate that it was January 2021, not 2022?
I don't recall that, ma'am.
Yes, the witness.
Say,
You got her answers.
yes.
Okay, I'm gonna show you what I have marked with State's Exhibit number 40. Does CPS have a system of keeping notes recorded by different caseworkers?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. What is State's Exhibit number 40?
It appears to be some contact narratives, several contact narratives involving Heather Bryant, Tiffany Garland, and Adrienne House.
Okay. Is there an entry from January 19th of 2020? January 19th, 2022.
Yes, ma'am.
And is there an entry by Heather Bryant from January 19th of 2022?
Yes, ma'am.
And is this documenting the encounter that has been at issue that Heather Bryant had with Mercedes Lasoya?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Did Heather Bryant notate that there were any injuries on Mercedes Lasoya on January 19th, 2022?
This one right here, ma'am, is for Jordan Lasoya.
Okay.
And she doesn't notate that there's no observed marks or bruises on her.
Okay.
One more.
Okay. What is the family team meeting?
Family team meeting is basically bringing together parents, grandparents at times, various family members, aunts, uncles. Sometimes we even include medical professionals sometimes, and it's addressing the issue. If the issue, for example, deals with some kind of physical abuse or some kind of narcotic usage in the home, we'll address those out in the open with the family and talk with the family. It's kind of like bringing the whole family together and saying, this is the issue that we have at hand. What can we do to remedy this issue? What needs to be in place to kind of remedy that issue, and having an extra set of eyes for that particular issue.
Okay. When CPS is about to close a case, would it be normal for them to have a family team meeting?
It is a common practice, yes, ma'am.
Okay, and why would you have a family team meeting?
Before departing the case, we like to bring everyone together to say, okay, before we depart this case, these are our concerns. How, making sure that everybody understands those concerns and that we move forward after that.
Okay. How many family team meetings are there typically in a CPS investigation?
About one
About
or
one?
so. Yes, ma'am. Probably two if they want to add another family member that maybe did not show the first one.
Okay. And on State's Exhibit number 40 that I just showed you, it looks like there was contact with the family on that January 19th, 2022.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. If a caseworker goes up to the house, are they gonna just talk to one child, or will they talk to both?
If both children are present, they're going to see both children.
Okay. Did Heather Bryant initiate a removal of Mercedes on that day?
No, ma'am.
Okay. In fact, she was scheduling a family team meeting for the following week.
Yes, ma'am.